I was born and raised in Appalachia. That's me with my uncle. He was a teacher like my father, and that's my great-grandfather, a tradesman. We're staying in a little country store that my grandparents ran for 60 years. Though rural, a good school was the center of everything. The school closed in the 80s and folks moved away. And today, abandoned remnants and thick kudzu are all that remain of this little community. By the early 1980s, several hundred miles away at the same time, but in reverse, the New York's Lower East Side in the 1970s have been overgrown by neglect. And today it's the epicenter of cool, hip consumer culture. How did this happen? Let's take a closer look. It was due to the rebellious gay culture, cheap rents, and outsider arts movement that made the Lower East Side in the 70s give rise to arts innovators that we have built upon for the last 40 years. Folks like Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, La Mama Theater, Nuyorican poets, Patti Smith, and punk rock music all found their voice in this place. And yet, by the early 80s, the area was New York's hot scene, and money arrived. And by 1990, many of the artistic innovators were among the 27,000 plus people who had died of AIDS. They were replaced by conservative spokespeople and consumerism. What had started as a place of outsider culture had become mainstream. This led to gentrification, the physical reconstitution of a city to a homogenized playground for those with means. And this model, it spread like metaphorical kudzu throughout this nation, suffocating diversity and bringing with it conservatism and passivity. Artists were not the bad guys. We had been used and driven out too. But the bell had already been rung. There was money to be made. Witness the birth of a new economic development model in the United States and the rise of the creative class. The urban lesson from this mega-selling book is this. For a city to succeed, it must aim to attract creative professionals who are the wave of the future, as the author says. And so cities all across this country began to compete for this creative class. A city needed to know it was on stage. It had to compete for this preferred demographic. In urban placemaking parlance, it's called principles of persuasion. Emphasize novelty, contrast, surprise, color. In other words, cities must become the collective embodiment of Robin Williams. And once you get this audience, you simply watch them go. If this strategy sounds like an oversimplified way to change what ails a city, it's because it is. Experience has taught me that there is no magic bullet to prosperity. A classic episode of the cartoon South Park teaches us an important lesson about urban revitalization policy. A lot of very well-meaning approaches are based on a worldview that I believe is more appropriate to the underpants gnomes of South Park than a reasoned and equitable approach to placemaking. The gnomes steal underpants as part of a big plan broken down into 3 phases. Collect underpants, and you create profit. When the gnomes are asked how they get from underpants to profit, they don't have a good answer. And likewise, some creative placemaking strategies miss the most important part: creating a place that is sustainable and equitable for all. The cost of blindly acquiescing to copycat community building is too great. These costs are not simply aesthetic or even economic. These costs are the ability to distinguish creativity from repetition and ultimately truth from fiction. The artist Mel Chin describes art as a catalytic force that allows options to become visible. And I believe that any progress toward an equitable city requires us to hold a thriving citizen and a thriving economy as equal priorities in our strategies. Ideas 40203 is a contemporary art chamber of commerce that helps artists become those skilled, thoughtful catalysts. Our methods are holistic. We intend to sync up the human, the economic, and environmental policies in our city. We promote education and workforce development as the primary drivers of economic growth and sustainability. We educate artists on new opportunities to financially support and inform their roles as culture producers. We expand their artists' contributions to building Louisville's innovation economy, and we are reinventing what a specialty chamber of commerce can be and do in the 21st century. Here are just a few examples that I'd like to talk about tonight. After the violence at the Big Four, we used art as a common language in which all share equally as a human right to open up a dialogue. bringing artists and government together to stem the violence in our communities, and we celebrated our differences, knowing that differences can be the foundation of a wall or the intention of a bridge. Our Creative Innovation Zone project in Smoketown, partnered with Youth Build Louisville, uses art as a teaching tool. One example is the STEAM Exchange. The exchange offers free after-school arts outreach events and computer skills training. More than 400 young people have participated in just the first 2 months alone. Our partnership with Youth Build has been a great one. Laquan and Sierra, participants there, wanted to become environmental leaders in their community. And so we provided them the chance to lead through an agri-science and arts education apprenticeship in Versailles, France. And they are now helping to transform fallow urban land into productive, healthy green spaces in Smoketown and in their community of Newburgh. Along with Youth Build, we have partnered with Chef Ed Lee on a new culinary program that provides paid apprenticeships. This is just one example of our emerging approach to workforce development, which eliminates barriers to jobs and inspires a new generation of creative thinkers and doers. 20 new jobs by the end of 2015. That is the goal. We're working with young filmmakers, poets, DJs, and dancers and musicians to help them use their art to lift up voices that might not otherwise be heard. And just 2 weeks ago, 300 people gathered across the street from the construction site of Shepherd Square to celebrate the 150-year history of this resilient community of Smoketown. We offer a new creative framework for growth in the city of Louisville. And we pronounce tonight that art and education are human rights with immense potential to transform lives, and we believe that on this foundation rests the cornerstone of personal empowerment, creative freedom, and a sustainable human development approach to building our city for this generation and for those to come. Thank you.